Good morning.
Happy morning to David Scott Duncan from the US and other participants joining from US and Canada. And a happy evening to folks from India. Pleased to welcome you all to this Spin Chennai's big video conference session with David, the MD of Innosight. We are navigating in a world with a lot of uncertainties as well as opportunities. So if you look at digital transformation, there is a huge opportunity where every industry is going through the different phases of digital transformation. Whereas if you look at the brick and mortar kind of operations, there is a lot of uncertainty. At Spin Chennai, we are planning the next big conference called SpyCon 2021 on digital transformation. The theme is going to be around digital transformation maturity, and this is slated for September 3rd. So please be tuned to receive more info from Spin Chennai on this conference as we move forward. So before David gets to talk today, I have the pleasant duty of doing three things. Set the context for the session, introduce David, as well as a brief intro about Spin Chennai to David and to those who are new. So, we'll start with today's session. The secret lives of customers, how to solve the mystery of customer behavior, right? Very, very, very powerful topic. So this is the customer, we say always, king, customer is queen, right? But if you see the marketers, they have lost the forest for the trees, focusing too much on creating products for narrow demographic segments rather than satisfying the needs of customers. Customers want to hire a product to do a job. As the Harvard Business legendary marketing professor Theodore Levitz put it, people don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole, right? So all of us think in terms of, offering a drill. But what the customer really wants is a quarter-inch hole. They don't, necessarily have to have the drill only to get that. So the marketer's task is to understand the job the customer wants to do to get done and design products and brands that fill the need. Look at designing products that do a job rather than fill a product segment. This is a very, very powerful theme. Right? There is a clear difference. I think, during this session, that is what we will all understand more deeply, more intensely. So every time, every job, people need or want to do has a social dimension, a functional, and an emotional dimension. If marketers understand each of these dimensions, then they can design a product that is precisely targeted to do the job. So it is not the customer, but it is the fundamental unit of analysis for a marketer is the job, not the customer. I think there is a very, very subtle shift which we need to appreciate. So there is an interesting case study. I don't know whether if I am kind of preempting David on this, but I know he has got several stories. So this is a story from McDonald's. For those who have not heard about it, this is a very, very interesting case study. So as is need for any company, McDonald's fast food restaurant, they wanted to improve sales of its milkshakes. They felt it was kind of stagnating. So naturally, whenever a product is stagnating or this one, they will the marketers would have defined the market segment by product and then segment it further by profiling the demographic and personality characteristics of the customers who frequently bought the milkshakes. Next, they will invite the people who fit this profile to kind of evaluate whether making the shake thicker, thinner, more chocolatey, chunkier would satisfy them better, right? Then the panelists will give feedback and the improvement that they will put in, right? But McDonald exactly did all these standard processes, but they never that there was no improvement on sales. So they were really puzzled. So that is when I think they talked to Professor Clayton Christensen of the Harvard Business School. I think he sent a team of researchers. I think at least one researcher per 2-3 restaurants they put in. They spent a long day in the restaurant seeking to understand the jobs that customers were trying to do when they hire a milkshake, right? So they basically, as a process, they chronicled what time each milkshake was bought, what other products the customers purchased, whether these customers were alone or with a group, whether they consumed the shake on the premises or drove off with it in the car, and so on. Like traditional research. This is a what do you call primary research. They were surprised to find that 40% of all milkshakes are purchased in the early morning. So it is always intuitive if during the afternoon or evening is when you would prefer a milkshake kind of thing, which is slightly heavier and it is more taken after a meal or kind of so. But it was counterintuitive that more 40% of milkshakes were purchased in the morning, early morning, that too, right? And when the customers looked at it, they were all alone. Those who purchased were alone. They did not buy anything else, right? The other interesting fact was they were alone, and they consumed the shake in their cars. They took the shake and drove off. The researcher then returned to interview the morning customers as they left the restaurant, shake in hand, in an effort to understand what caused them to hire the milkshake in the first place. So most interestingly, what they found out was most bought it to do a similar job. They faced a long and boring commute and needed something to make the drive more interesting. Right? They were not yet hungry, but knew that they would be hungry by 10 a.m. They wanted to consume something now that would stay off hunger by 10 a.m. Right? Until noon, at least, they will be able to pull on with something, heavy, which will really help them. So what they faced was a couple of constraints. They were in a hurry, right? In the morning, they were wearing work clothes. Many of them, the research found out that they were wearing work clothes, and they had one free hand. Obviously, one hand was in the steering wheel, the other hand, they were driving. The researcher inquired further, and then they tried to find out whether you were, did you, instead of buying milkshake, did you buy anything else instead? They said some days, they bought a bagel, right? But bagels were too dry, so it did not help. So, and the bagels, they put cream cheese or jam, they got sticky fingers, and kind of it made the steering wheel gooey, right? So they were not comfortable. Sometimes these commuters bought a banana, but it did not last long to solve the boring commute. Particularly, many of them drive 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, and all that to the work. So donuts did not carry people past the 10 a.m. hunger attack. The milkshake, it turned out, did the job better than any of the competitors. It took people 20 minutes to suck the vicious milkshake through the thin straw, addressing the boring commute problem. They could consume it cleanly with one hand, right? Obviously, the milkshake, with one hand, they could consume it well. And by 10 a.m., 10:30, they did not feel so hungry, right? They were feeling less hungry with milkshakes when compared to other alternatives. So maybe you may wonder, hey, is it a healthy food? No, it may not be a healthy food, but uh, becoming healthy was not the core they were looking at. They were hiring the milkshake to do a certain job, that is to make them not feel hungry by 10 a.m. and also avoid and also feel better in the boring commute. So the job, not the customer, is the fundamental unit of analysis, right? When they tried to do that, they were able to find this pattern. So uh, I think this is a very, very important aspect to understand. Once they understood this, then they looked at how can you improve, how can you sell more, right? Uh, the making the milkshake uh, thicker, more thicker, so that it will, instead of 20 minutes, it will take 30 minutes, right? Putting some fruity concoctions, made sure that some more what do you call variations got added, and it enriched the customer experience. So now the competition is to the milkshake or the improvement uh, has conjured different set of images, different set of options. So that is the important research they understood when they try to do. This is what is known as trying to customers what job they are trying to do, right? So once they understood the job the customers were trying to do, it became very clear what improvements the milkshake will get those jobs done even better, and which were irrelevant, right? Making them chocolatey or coming out with a different color. Those were not the options customers were. Customers did not bother about the color or those kind of variations. Instead, they were looking for something which will, which is more thicker, which will last longer, and those kind of attributes. So it is very, very important. It came from understanding the job and not the customer, right? There are several evidences. This is one case study. I'm sure there are a whole lot of case studies, uh, which David may talk about. See, customers can be a mystery, right? Despite the availability of more data than ever before, everyone from the CEO to the salespeople in the field still find it challenging to understand who the customers really are, why they act as they do, and what they really want. I think these are $1 million questions, and everybody is grappling with. Uh, so the ability to see the customers with fresh eyes is something very, very important. Uh, so it is almost like we have to act like the Sherlock Holmes of our business. We're asking the right questions, gathering clues, identifying patterns, and developing insights into how to truly improve the customers' lives. Very, very important. Even the COVID era, characterized by radical changes in the way people are living and in the way organizations are operating, makes this understanding the changing priorities and the circumstances of customers very challenging. So we have to find new ways to serve them, more important than ever. So coming to Mr. David Duncan, he has a PhD in physics. He brings long years of experience. Had been part of the global consultancy at McKinsey for 4 years. After which, around 2006, he joined Innosight. He is the managing director at Innosight, where he works with the leaders to create customer-centric teams, strategies, and organizations. He is the co-author of two books, including the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Competing Against Luck, the story of innovation and customer choice, written by, along with the late Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen. His recent book is The Secret Life of Customers, which we are going to see today, also the topic of the day. We are really fortunate to have him share his thoughts today with us. Coming to the third aspect about Spin, a little short of 25 years as a knowledge ecosystem. Spin Chennai is affiliated to CMU, Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineering Institute, as well as ISACA, the global body. Our vision is to build a world-class knowledge ecosystem, which is very compelling, highly relevant and value-adding to the people and industry, distinctively futuristic and passionately co-creative. Right? We have a 3,000 member knowledge ecosystem consisting of CXOs, senior leaders, SVPs, VPs, HR, marketing, quality and delivery professionals, domain professionals from various verticals, including BFSI, telecom, automotive, manufacturing industry, and several international gurus who have been associated with Spin Chennai, include the famous Dr. Watts Humphrey, who is hailed as the father of software quality, in whose honor we have been running a Watts Humphrey Award for last 10 to 11 years. Every year, it is happening where the industry best case studies or they compete to win the award. We have had several international gurus associated with Spin Chennai, including Louis Trigger from Israel, theory of constraints expert, Dr. Bill Curtis from the CMMI Institute, who also developed the world famous CMMI model, people CMM model and all that. Professor Manu Vora, one of the top management consultants from the US. Mark Johnson, who is a colleague of Mr. David Duncan. Dr. Jeff Sutherland, who is a co-founder of Scrum, the famous Agile model. The Michael Krigsman, author of CXO Talk with more than 1,000 appearances. Barry Kriggs, ex-Microsoft CTO for IT. Steve Beres, partner at Bain. Manuel Arriaga of Google, YouTube. Mr. Lakshmi Shankar, the top 10 of Twitter. Mr. Jason Yee of Gremlin on chaos engineering. There have been lots of interesting sessions over the last 1.5 years. So without spending any more time, please keep updating your questions as we move along in the chat facility. At the end of the talk, I'll be relaying some of the relevant questions to David for his response. In case we don't find time to answer your question, definitely we will get back with David. So I would encourage each and every one of you to unmute. At this point, I will give you 10 seconds, and then put your hands together to welcome David to address the Spin Chennai community.
Thank you.
David.
Great, thank you, Dr. Rajaram, and good evening, I suppose, everybody who's joining from India. Very excited to be with you for the next hour or so. And I was just chatting before we started with Dr. Rajaram about my love of your country of India. I had the chance to visit it 4 times, including spending a week in Chennai, and spent a couple of months traveling around the country, actually trying to understand the mystery of customer behavior. It was on behalf of a client. We were doing market research in the field of heart disease and trying to understand the jobs to be done of patients, of doctors, of referring physicians, of hospitals, and was just truly one of the best experiences, not just of my career, but of my life. And I hope to be able to go back someday. Well, Dr. Rajaram, that was an incredible introduction because you introduced many of the concepts that we're going to touch on today. So I really appreciate that. You make my job easier. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the ideas from a book that came out recently, which is about how do you understand customers. Before I get into that, I thought I would just, let me make sure this is working here. I'm trying to advance the slide. There we go. Did that slide just pop forward? Yeah. Great. I'm not going to spread a lot of propaganda about Innosight, but I did just want to share a little bit about the background, just so you kind of know where I'm coming from in terms of my experience. So for the past 16 years, I've been working for Innosight. It's a consulting firm. It was started by the great Clay Christensen, who was the one of the main characters in the famous milkshake story that Dr. Rajaram just shared. I'm sure you're familiar with his book, The Innovator's Dilemma, which is a book about why great successful companies get kind of hardwired into a certain way of doing things, and it becomes very hard for them to evolve. And it sows the seed for them to be disrupted by startups that are coming things from a different angle. It's a universal problem. Every big organization faces it. Clay started Innosight 21 years ago, along with Mark Johnson, to have a consulting vehicle to try to figure out practical solutions for big companies for how they can break out of that dilemma. So everything that we do is in some ways related to that objective of helping large successful organizations create the next version of themselves. So we do a lot of work on long-term growth strategy, helping to transform organizational capabilities. And we even help them look out in the world and try to identify opportunities for new growth businesses, new disruptive businesses. We write a lot of stuff about all of those topics as we learn from our clients and from our research. And at the heart of all of our work is this need to understand the needs of customers and how they're evolving. And so let's see this. There we go. So to that end, I recently wrote a book that came out just a couple of months ago called The Secret Lives of Customers. And I'm going to share with you, for the most part, some ideas from this book. And I'll tell you a little bit about kind of what it's about, why I wrote it. So it's aimed at really teaching anyone in any type of role, in any type of organization, what they need to know, the skills, concepts, tools they can use to understand the customers that they're either serving today or that they want to serve. And so it's a very broad audience, and it's designed to be, accessible by a very broad audience. And the reason it's so broad is it derives from a definition I have of what a customer is. So I think of a customer as either a person or a group or an organization whose problems and goals you want to understand well enough that you can find ways to help them, right? So help them, by help, I mean help them solve their problems, achieve their goals. And that's a positive framing of what a customer is. Okay, so a customer isn't somebody you're trying to exploit, rather it's somebody you're coming at from the perspective of wanting to find ways to help them. And if you accept that definition, it means that literally every person in an organization, no matter what your role is, you both are a customer and you have customers, right? So obviously people that are facing in some way the outside customers need to worry about understanding their problems and goals. If you're in sales, marketing, product development, you're interested in understanding the customers outside your organization. But even if you're in an internal role, like HR or finance, you have customers, right? There are people inside the organization whose problems and goals you want to understand so you can help them. And that's even true if you're a manager, right? The people on your team that you're managing, right? They're your customers in the sense, right? They have problems and goals you want to help them with, and vice versa. You want to help your manager get his or her problems and goals solved. And so given that universal need, the first thing you need to have if you have customers is a way to understand from their perspective what exactly it is they would find helpful, right? So how do you do that, right? And that's what this book is intended to address, that gap that I saw. If you think about it, there isn't really a standard, widely adopted, easy to access way for the average person to understand their customers. There isn't a Lean Six Sigma methodology out there for that. There are things that are for sophisticated data scientists, probably like some of the folks on right now, and for market research departments to understand customers, but there isn't anything that just everyone else can use, and that's what this was focused on. So I'm going to go into a little bit about that now. 3 objectives: 1, just share some of these concepts and techniques. 2, I'd like to talk about how this is relevant in a technology context, right? If you're in a tech development role, software role, how is this relevant? And then, of course, answer any questions you might have throughout. So let me tell you a little bit about the format of this book. So Dr. Rajaram referenced this idea of being the Sherlock Holmes of your organization or of the business world. So I took a fairly unorthodox approach to writing this book. It's written for the most part in the format of a fictional detective story. It's almost a short novel. And it was inspired by the format of the books of a guy named Patrick Lencioni, who wrote, I think his most famous book is this book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And he's written a dozen or so books. They've sold millions and millions of copies. And they all have this format of about 85% of the book is a fictional story about some company or leadership team, and they've got some problem they're facing. And then the plot of the story is they work through the solution to the problem by applying whatever frameworks and tools and concepts he's trying to teach. That's about 85% of the book. Then he steps out of the story at the end for a short section, which is not a fictional story, and just explains the approach and tools directly. And I decided to take that approach to this book, right? So it's about 85% a story, 15% nonfiction at the end, if you want to skip straight to the frameworks and concepts. And the reason I did that was, again, to my point earlier, I wanted it to be something that everybody could read. Maybe people that didn't have the appetite for a more technical business book. It's quick and it's supposed to be more engaging maybe than a typical business book, and fun to read. But there was also something about the nature of this topic that made it particularly amenable to this format, which is that oftentimes if you're trying to teach people how to understand customers, and in particular how to have useful conversations with customers, the best way to do that is to have them watch you do it. And then you step back and you talk about what happened and what the approach was. And oftentimes to somebody watching that for the first time, that seems a little bit random and ad hoc, and the conversations kind of jump around a little bit. And I wanted to capture what it looks and feels like to be experiencing those conversations when they're done well, and then have the opportunity to step back and kind of lift up the cover on what was actually happening and what was learned. And so the fictional format gave me the opportunity to do that. And the particular format within fiction that it is it's a mystery story, a detective story. And I chose that as a kind of metaphor because, having done a lot of primary customer research in my career, probably thousands of hours of customer interviews, I've always thought there was this kind of fun parallel between that work and the work of a detective, right? So if you're going out in the market, like say I did in India, talking to dozens and dozens of people, what does that feel like? Well, you're going out, you're doing interviews, you're making observations, you're gathering clues, you're piecing together patterns, trying to pull out insights to crack some sort of case, to solve some sort of mystery, just like a detective does in a mystery story. And so that's why I chose that format. And I just wanted to frame that to kind of organize us getting into some of these concepts and details. So the first point, Dr. Rajam already made this, is that customers can be a mystery, right? So they're always surprising us. We're never quite sure why they're doing what they're doing. And so the book asserts that if you want to understand them, you need to start thinking like a detective, or a market detective. And through the plot of the book, it revolves around a fictitious chain of coffee shops. It's a chain of coffee shops that's grown rapidly in one region of the United States. At the beginning of the plot, they're about to go public and do an IPO so they can raise capital to expand nationally. Just at about that time, their sales start to plateau and shrink a little bit. Some of their most loyal customers leave. And so the leadership team hires a person who is a market researcher who bills himself as a market detective, comes in and needs to understand what's been going on in this coffee shop in order to figure out how they can turn things around. And so what the book lays out is that if you accept that understanding customers is like detective work, so how do you become a market detective? What do you need to learn yourselves to be able to have useful conversations with customers that enable you to understand their problems and goals well enough to help them? So one of the core frameworks is that you need three things. You need a language, a method, and a mindset. The first thing you need is a language that describes the information you're looking for. right? So if you think about it, every craft out there, whether it's accounting or law or medicine, they all have their own specialized vocabulary that comprises the terms of art of that discipline, right? So if you're an accountant, you talk about debits and credits and cash flow statements and balance sheets and so on. If you're a doctor, you talk about chronic and acute conditions and comorbidities and so on. And so it should be the same for the craft of the market detective or the craft of understanding customers. You need a language that contains a vocabulary that gives you what you need to be able to describe what it is you're trying to understand about customers, right? And I'm going to talk about what the elements of that language are. Jobs to be done is one idea within that language, but there are other things as well. So once you have a language, you need then a method for applying that language, going out into the world, discovering that information, organizing it, interpreting it, drawing out insights that enable you to solve whatever type of mystery or business problem you're trying to solve. And then finally, you need to go into all of those activities with the right set of mindsets so that you maximize your chances of doing so. So what this book teaches is that you need a language, method, mindset, and it lays out all of those things in great detail through the story. And I'm going to cover each of those in turn now, just to give you some practical tools you can take away even today. So I'm going to start with this idea of language, and there's four primary, say, elements of the vocabulary of this language that I want to talk about. And again, over the next 10, 15 minutes, I want to talk about the elements of this language, and I'll get into the method to apply it next. But for now, I just want you to get familiar with some of these terms and why they're useful and what they're for. So jobs to be done, circumstances, this idea of how customers define quality, and then what we call the help wanted signs. So Dr. Rajaram already gave a great introduction to this idea of jobs to be done. This is at the heart of the language that I try to teach in this book. Jobs is a concept that's been around for a little over 20 years. Clay Christensen talked about it a lot. It was an idea that he believed was as important and profound as the idea of disruptive innovation, which was an idea that he developed himself, this idea of jobs to be done. We wrote a book about it back in 2016, which was the book Clay always wanted to write about, Jobs to be Done, which was more conceptual in nature, and it includes the famous milkshake story, which Dr. Rajaram told so well. My follow-up book is also about jobs to be done in a sense, but it aims to get more practical, more applied. Competing Against Luck was more of a conceptual book that made the case that this was a big, important idea. And the gap I was trying to fill with this new book is, okay, well, if you're excited about that idea, what do you actually do with it if you want to go solve a problem with it? So the basic idea of jobs to be done is that people don't buy products and services, they hire them to get jobs done in their lives. So jobs is firstly a model of why customers do what they do. Why do they pull some new innovations into their lives, and why do they reject others, right? It takes energy to pull something new into your life. You have to understand it and pay money for it, and then adapt your reality to this new product. What is the motivating force that causes people to do that? It's not the products and services themselves. We don't buy them because we care about them intrinsically. Rather, it's because we have jobs that pop up in our lives we want to get done, either problems we want to solve or goals we want to achieve. And those are the things that give us the energy to do something rather than just stick with the status quo. So I think about a job as a problem a customer wants to solve or a goal they want to achieve. It could be a problem like, it could be a small problem like soothing a sore throat, or a problem like, repair my home. Or it could be a goal, something aspirational, like I want to get into the university, or I want to become a doctor, or run a marathon, or something like that. Either of those are jobs. And the reason it's such a profoundly useful idea is that it explains why people embrace some other innovations and reject others. And that's really at the heart of any business success, right? That's the fuel that that powers any company's success, right? So you're well advised to try to understand what those jobs are. And we see this idea getting more and more traction around the world. We had the good fortune to have Jack Dorsey come to Innosight 2 years ago now in 2019 for a CEO Summit event we did. And one of my colleagues did a Q&A with him for an hour. The entire session was about how they had applied jobs to be done at Twitter and Square, and how powerful it had been as a way to frame their strategic orientation and then align everybody around that and kind of cascade that into the way they did things. So just one prominent endorsement of the idea of jobs to be done. And I want to go a little bit deeper into jobs, again, as a core element of this language. So again, thanks to that great introduction, you've already had a preview that there are 3 types of jobs. So this is like a level beneath that higher level of the language, right? So there's jobs, but then there's 3 types of jobs. There's functional jobs, emotional jobs, social jobs. Just as an example, imagine we're trying to understand the jobs to be done for which this young woman has hired this pair of headphones. Some of those could be functional, right? She might be heading to do her homework and wants to be able to stay focused on her homework without any distractions, block out the outside world. Some of those jobs might be emotional. Maybe she's playing music that energizes her and keeps her energy level high, that gets her revved up for a test she's about to go in to take. And maybe some of those jobs are social. Maybe it's about how she wants to be perceived. She's wearing a fashionable set of headphones that makes her look cool, or maybe she's listening to the latest music as a way to be current on and informed, so she can share that with friends when she goes to a party later, right? These are all speculative, of course, it's just a made up example, but you can see that just this simple product of a headphones that so many of us wear every day, it could be multiple different jobs that we're solving for, and it could be all of these at the same time. Very often when we hire a product, it's because we want to get a whole bundle of jobs done at the same time. Just another quick example of jobs really quickly. Think about Uber, right? So why do we hire Uber, right? It's to get a bundle of functional, emotional, social jobs done. So there's functional jobs, like I want to be able to get from place A to place B. I want to be able to do that without having to carry cash. I'd like the ride experience to be a nice one. I've got a job of saving time. It's like a ubiquitous job we all have. So this helps me avoid just standing outside waiting for the random cab to drive by. There's a bunch of emotional jobs we hire it for too, right? One of the most wonderful things about Uber is that I don't, whatever the weather is, wherever I happen to be, I can order a car and then I can watch it come on my screen. So I know exactly when it's going to arrive, and it alleviates that anxiety you have around the uncertainty of whether I'm going to find a cab or not. And then, you don't necessarily need to go through the stress of figuring out, well, what's the right tip I should do, because it's all kind of taken care of for you by the app. And then there might be some social jobs that you have conceivably for hiring Uber. Maybe you want to be seen as you're environmentally conscious, you're carpooling. Maybe you want to feel like you're trendy, part of the sharing economy. Maybe you order an Uber black car because you want to convey that you're successful or important or something. I'm not saying these are all the reasons that everybody always hires Uber, but you can see that there's a whole spectrum of reasons you might hire the same thing. Again, just to give you a more granular sense of what we mean by job to be done and these different types of jobs. So before I go to the next element of the language, right, we're still on jobs to be done within that language method mindset construct. I want to spend a little bit of time and do a quick exercise with you to get you a little engaged, to illustrate how powerful looking at things through this jobs lens is, right? And what I'll assert is that when you think about the world through the lens of jobs, almost everything changes. who you compete against changes, how you compete, how you innovate, how big opportunities are, what trends you should worry about. And to make that real for you, I'm just going to ask you a quick question, and you can enter your answers in the chat. I figured out here how I can look at it. So why do you hire a cup of coffee? So think about it. So I'm assuming that most people drink coffee or some equivalent, maybe tea. What are some of the reasons for which you hire a cup of coffee? And I've got some answers here. So energize myself, revitalize. Yeah, and just go ahead and enter them in the chat. High quality coffee. Anything else? Imagine you're going into a coffee shop, right? As in the avoid sleep. I like that one. Experience, to think through, taste. Right. Imagine you're going into a coffee shop, right? Like you're in the narrative of this plot that I was describing. Why might you go in and buy a coffee and sit in a coffee shop and have a cup of coffee? Ambiance, relaxing. You're tempted by seeing coffee. You just can't help yourself. You're forced to do it. To better investigate. Yes, that could be the case. Well, so to eat apple pie, that's right. I don't really want coffee. I just want an apple pie. These are quite funny and good answers. I like them. Well, so here's some of the answers I've heard when I've asked this question about what jobs you're hiring coffee for. Give me an excuse for an informal chat. I want to meet. I want to have a meeting with somebody informally. I say, well, let's go grab a coffee. Maybe I want to avoid feeling awkward during a break. So I want to have something in my hands. I'm at a social event, or I'm at a conference and a break. I'm going to get coffee, so I'm not just standing around. Feeling alert and energized. I like the reverse framing of that, of avoiding sleep. That was funny. Get free Wi-Fi. This is something that I hire coffee for all the time. If I'm traveling, I'm in a foreign city, I might pop into a coffee shop and because I need to do some work while I'm on the road. I don't have an office, and I buy a cup of coffee because that's kind of like the rent I have to pay to be in the cafe. Have a morning ritual. A lot of people think about this aspect of every morning I just make coffee. It's part of my ritual. It makes me feel like I'm in my routine. Taking a break during the day, treat myself to a luxury, get work done on the go, and so on. So there's a lot of reasons you could hire coffee, right? Like literally every single one of these is a different job to be done for to show off. I like that one too. These are great answers. So a lot of reasons a lot of jobs to be done we might hire a coffee for, right? Problems or goals that we have that we might hire a coffee or a coffee shop. And we could be the exact same person, right? And hire the exact same cup of coffee and coffee shop, but have all of these different jobs to be done depending on the circumstance, where we are in our day or in our lives. And I want to explain now, why does that matter so much, right? So, imagine that you are, the owner of this coffee shop, maybe in the story that I wrote, and you're trying to figure out, like, how do I grow my business? Like what's going on in my market? How do I grow it? Well, if you look at what you are doing, if you define your business from a product-centric perspective, right? You say, we're in the coffee business, right? And the goal we're trying to do is to help people get a better cup of coffee, right? That's a product-centric way of describing the business that you're in. It's exactly like what Dr. Rajaram was saying in this quote from Ted Levitt. People don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. Well, companies that make drills often think about themselves as being in the drill business, right? Like they define themselves in this product-centric way, right? Car companies might think about themselves as being in the car business, or insurance companies, we're in the insurance business. Those are all product-centric ways of framing what it is you do fundamentally what your identity is as an organization. And it's almost universal that happens, right? And there's a lot of good reasons that happens, right? Once you move past the startup phase and you start to scale, right? Then you start to organize yourselves around these products that you're selling, and you try to make more and more of them better and better, ever more efficiently. So you get kind of anchored into that product and thinking about how to make those products better. you have, you know, increasingly brilliant engineers and product developers like all of you on the phone right now who want to push the envelope of performance on those products with all your great ideas. Then the outside world, the analysts, Wall Street, they start to evaluate you based on your share of the product market, right? So how much share do you have of the coffee business or the car business? How, you know, and you're actually getting evaluated by how many products you're selling and what market share you have and so on. All of that kind of reinforces this product-centric way of thinking about it. But the problem is that that is disconnected from what's actually driving people to buy your products in the first place, which is that they're doing it because they have jobs they're trying to get done. And it's that disconnect between what's really causing people to buy your products and your fixation on your products themselves and starting to ignore those jobs or overlook them, that sets you up to be disrupted by some new entrant who's going to come in and understand those jobs better. So now I just want to contrast why that matters so much. So again, back to my question, imagine you're this manager of this coffee shop. One way you could look at your business is we're in the coffee business. I'm trying to help people get a better cup of coffee. Now imagine I thought about myself as being in the job, the business of helping people have informal chats, right? That's the business I'm in. I'm looking to focus on a market defined by people that have the job of having an informal chat. That's option one. Or I could be focused on the market of people that have the job to get work done while they're on the go, right? Those are two different markets. So what changes? Well, first of all, the competition changes. If I'm competing in the coffee business, I'm going to be competing with Starbucks. I'm going to be competing with McDonald's, who sells coffee. I might be competing with home coffee systems like Nespresso, where you can make your own coffee at home. But if I'm in the help people have informal chat business, I'm competing with things like going to dinner, going to a bar, going to a party, just hopping on the phone, getting on a Zoom call, all of those ways that we might have an informal chat. Alternatively, if I'm competing in the business of get work done on the go, I'm competing with the hotel rooms that we work in when we travel, or maybe these shared workspaces like WeWork, or maybe finding the local office, right? Completely different set of competitors, maybe going to a park, right? Completely radically different competitors. How I compete changes, right? If I'm in the coffee business, I'm going to compete by trying to make a better cup of coffee. I'm probably going to compete on product features, making it better and better. If I'm in the informal chat business, I'm going to think about the whole experience that I'm going to offer around that, of which coffee might be a component, but I'm going to try to solve for the job. And similarly with getting work done on the go business. Third example, how you innovate changes, right? So it's relatively constrained. If I'm in a product business, it's about pushing the envelope of performance around that product, or maybe coming up with some new products. If I'm competing on the job to be done, then it's very broad how I can innovate, right? I could innovate my product, my coffee, or I could innovate aspects of the experience. I mean, if you go into a Starbucks, for example, or I'm sure there are analogous chains in addition to Starbucks in India, there's a lot going on, right, in the experience that might be conducive to you having an informal chat, like maybe the music, how the tables are laid out, if you're getting work done on the go, similarly, music, ambient noise, how tables are laid out. Maybe there are special rooms they have for conferences within the coffee shop. When I go into a coffee shop on the go, I immediately am looking for power outlets, right? Which is because if I want to park there for a little while. Again, completely different priorities and dimensions of the experience than if I'm just looking for a better cup of coffee. The market size is very different, right? If the market size, if you're in the coffee business, is sort of total coffee sales or maybe total beverage sales of any kind. If you're in a jobs business, the market is typically a lot larger, and there's a lot of non-consumers you could think about focusing on. And finally, it even changes what you're paying attention to and what you ought to worry about in terms of what's going on in the world. And these are all just hypothetical examples. But if you're in the coffee business, you might be thinking about trends like people drinking less coffee, or these home do-it-yourself coffee systems getting better and better. If you're in the help people have an informal chat business, you might be paying attention to changes in how people connect or new social media platforms. If you're in the get work done on the go business, you might be focused on trends like shift to remote work, new video conferencing technologies. So you can see how different it is depending on products and even which jobs you picked, because we could have, there's probably 20, 30 jobs we could have made a list of for reasons you hire a coffee shop. And each of those could have been a column in this big matrix, and we would have had a completely different business. So what often happens is, and this happens in the story of the book, is that there's actually a whole wide range of jobs that people are hiring a coffee shop for, and that coffee shop is solving for all of those, maybe well or maybe badly at the same time, right? And one of the first things you want to do is clarify, well, why are we really getting hired today? Why are we getting fired today? And then we can figure out, well, which of those jobs do we really want to focus on going forward versus ones that are less important to me relative to the competition. Okay. So just to reorient you, that was a long digression on jobs to be done. We're in the language method mindset. I'm still going through some elements of the language. I'll go through the other ones much quicker, but I wanted to focus on jobs for a while because it's so important.
You can take a time. No, not a problem. I think we can all listen.
Okay, great.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, good. No, I think we're in good shape with respect to timing. So great. So the next element of the language is this idea of circumstance, and you can think about circumstance as the relevant context of your customer's life that you want to put some boundaries around within which they're trying to get these jobs done that you're looking to identify. So circumstances can be things like the situation they're in, what time of day is it? Where are they located? What are they doing? Who are they with? Are they alone? Are they with friends? They can be demographic variables, like how old are they? What stage of life are they in? What family status? Do they have kids? Are they married? And so on. Their financial status, gender, and so on. Identity-related factors like your values, your attitudes, beliefs, affiliations. And then finally, agency, and that's a little bit of a weird one, but what I mean by that is, are you interested in the jobs of this person, or are you interested in the jobs they have on behalf of somebody else, right? So, you often might want to understand your children's job, a child's job to be done, but but you're probably even more interested in the parents' jobs they have on behalf of their kids, because their kids might not have the same priorities their parents have for them. And the circumstance is it's like a field of vision you want to define, and you can zoom in narrowly or zoom out where you want to focus this jobs lens. And there's an example in the book of one of the customers of this coffee shop is a young woman who hires the coffee shop to get schoolwork done after class. In the circumstance of after class, a couple times a week. She's a college student, a pre-med student. So, those are various circumstance factors. The same character hires the same coffee shop on a Saturday night when she's with her friends because she wants to be entertained, socialize, meet people. So same customer, same solution they're hiring, right? The coffee shop, completely different circumstances on a weekday morning versus a Saturday night, and different jobs to be done. So that's why the circumstance is so important to understand. The third thing you want to understand, elements of this language again, are what are they hiring today? And importantly, why? And the why is a really important question because it gets you at things like, well, how does this customer, first of all, are they hiring anything today to get this job done in this circumstance? How are they evaluating what quality means for those different solutions, on what dimensions? What threshold of quality, right? Does it have to be very high performing in that dimension versus less performing versus not at all? What trade-offs do they want to make, right? Maybe better on one dimension, worse on another dimension. And then, what's really essential that they need as the table stakes versus what's optional. And this is one of the most helpful things you can examine, because it usually reveals a lot of interesting competitors that you hadn't necessarily thought of that look pretty different, right? So if I take the same example of this young woman and her headphones, so if we think about the job, right, if we look at that scenario from a jobs perspective, the job of staying focused without distractions, well, there's other things she could hire. She could wear these noise canceling headphones, or she could go to the library where it's very quiet, or she could try to trick herself into staying focused by giving herself a reward, right? Like there's other things you could do to solve for that job. If the job that she's hiring the headphones for is to feel energized and excited, she could certainly listen to music that gets her pumped up, or she could call a friend or do some, or drink coffee or an energy drink. There's other things that could get you excited and energized. If the job she has for her headphones is to project that she's cool and she's well informed, she could wear fashionable clothes. She could then, visit a trendy new cafe, right? And again, this is just a hypothetical example, but look at how different these competitors are from just other companies that make headphones, right? When you look at it from a jobs lens and not a product lens. And then the last element of this vocabulary is this idea of help wanted signs, right? So if people hire stuff to get jobs done in certain circumstances, what are the indicators when we're examining that something better is possible, right? And that more help is needed in some way. They're not satisfied with current solutions. Well, it could be that there's just no solution at all, right? So their jobs are completely unsatisfied. It could be that there are barriers in the way that make it hard for them to access existing solutions. Maybe it's too expensive. Maybe they don't have physical access to it because they're located far away. Maybe there's a barrier of knowledge or skills. So they need to be, you need some sort of specialized expertise to be able to use or access the solution, and so on. It could be that there's a solution, they have access to it, there's no barriers, but the solutions that exist are making the wrong trade-offs, right? Maybe they're too high performing on one dimension, low performing on another, or maybe they're just over-engineered, right? This is a very common thing, right? Again, that happens very naturally and with good intentions. Like the people that are developing products, pushing the envelope, they want to make them better and better and better. And maybe they go past the point that a customer really cares about, right? I remember when we were doing this project in India, we were working for one of the big medical device companies that sold pacemakers or implantable heart arrhythmia devices, like implantable defibrillators that they would plant into your heart, and they regulate or monitor your heart rhythms. And what we learned about it is that they have many, many features inside them, like about 1,000 different little variables you can turn on or off. And those get turned on or off at the time that they're implanted in your heart via software. And 90% of those features were never turned on, never used. And so just, way over engineered relative to what people needed. Finally, there could be a solution, could be accessible, could be making the right trade-offs, but maybe there's something better out there that just nobody could imagine. And we're kind of tunnel visioned into the way of looking at things. So that's the last element of the language that I'll cover. Okay, so language, method, mindset, that's the vocabulary. Okay, so what's the method that you can learn to apply that language to do something useful and solve some sort of business problem? And the thing I wanted to introduce you to here is this idea of the four most important questions that you're trying to answer about a customer. And it's almost a thought process that you want to learn. One of the challenges I had when I was trying to write this book was, well, okay, first of all, what is it that people need to learn? And then how do you teach that in a way that isn't so narrow that it's not really that widely applicable, or or doesn't turn into an encyclopedia of different use cases, right? For understanding different customers, like what are the universal things that you want to learn, regardless of the market research activity, the type of business problem, and that's what these 4 questions are. Just before I get to that, so what at a high level, what does a market investigation process look like? You know, you first start by defining whatever the problem is you want to solve. Could be an innovation or product development problem around what new products to develop, what new features to provide. Could be a strategy problem around finding new markets, new problems to address, new customer jobs, new business opportunities, or how do we adapt to a changing environment. Could be a marketing related problem around creating messages that resonate, launching a new channel, and so on. Or it could even be an organizational problem. This was kind of the Twitter Jack Dorsey example, where they were trying to align the company and the culture around an explicit set of high-level jobs that they exist to solve. So they were all aligned around a common direction. So define the problem, then plan what your investigation is. Like, who do you want to talk to? Where do you want to go to talk to them? When do you want to talk to them? In what circumstances? Then you go and you do your research, your market investigation, and then draw out insights. And what I'm going to talk about here with the method is primarily steps 3 and 4, right? So what do you do once you're out there doing something? And what I chose to focus on in the book is, for the purposes of teaching these ideas, is how do you have a one-on-one conversation with another actual live human being, right? So there's lots of ways you can gather information about customers. You can talk to them, you can do focus groups, you can observe them, you can do surveys. There's all kinds of sophisticated data gathering and analytics you can do that you all know far more about than I do. But for the purposes of teaching this language method mindset, I wanted to focus on the one-on-one conversation, live conversation. And I think about that as being the atomic unit of customer research, right? If you can learn how to do that, well, so first of all, it's almost always useful, no matter what your role, no matter how technical it gets. It's almost always useful to talk to somebody. It's often the most useful thing you can do and the thing that can save you the most time. But it's also, if you can learn the language method and mindset for how you do that, then you'll know what you need to know to be able to apply it in all of these other ways as well. And so this is kind of the method in the nutshell. And apologies, there's a lot going on this page, but let me kind of break it down. And I just have a couple other things to cover, and then we can go to Q&A. First of all, there's these 4 questions that you want to answer about your customer. So, and that's what's here on the left, right? These big 4 questions. So what circumstance are they in? What jobs are they trying to get done in that circumstance? What are they hiring today to get those jobs done? And importantly, why? Like, how are they evaluating them? And then what are the help wanted signs, right? These are the 4 things that are kind of a compass of what you're trying to understand about customers. And importantly, you're not actually asking them these questions, right? Like they wouldn't know what you were talking about, right? If you went to a customer in a coffee shop and said, what jobs are you trying to get done? Why are you hiring this coffee shop? That would be strange, right? But rather, and so there's this distinction between these questions you're trying to answer and then what you actually say in the interviews, right? And that's a really important thing to internalize, but these questions are the compass that guide whether or not your conversation is successful. How you have those conversations is different than just asking these questions, right? And so I think about a one-on-one conversation as a series of prompts, right? Those could be questions, they could just be topics you want to bring up. And what you're looking for is prompts that trigger the person you're talking to talk about things that are related to this information that you're trying to gather, right? And these are some illustrations of that, right? How do you spend a typical day? Tell us about your journey related to some particular situation. And you often want to prompt them in ways that are broader than a narrow question around a product. You want to be open to learning broader things. So these are some example prompts. Everybody can kind of come up with their own list of things that works for them. But the main thing I wanted to get across about the method is that there's these 4 questions. This is the compass. And then the prompts are what kind of guide you, are what you're doing to engage somebody in a useful conversation. And this gets at, how can you simultaneously have a conversation that's feels a little bit meandering and even a little bit random, right? But still have structure to it and still be useful, right? You actually want to let them unfold in ways that are surprising to you. So that's how you learn new things. But as long as you have the structure in your head, you can still guide that in a way that's useful. So that's the method. Last thing then is, okay, what do I mean by mindset? Well, there's four things that I would say you want to go into conversations like this with, 4 mindsets. I'm sure there's more. These are the ones I thought would be good to call out. First of all, be genuinely interested in the people you're talking to. So this seems like maybe it's an obvious thing, but it really helps if you really care about learning about somebody's life and kind of what's going on and how you can help them, what their problems are, their goals. And it just has never failed to amaze me, having, again, probably done thousands of hours of these, how excited people get to share things about themselves if you show up and you're genuinely interested in learning what they have to say. Number 2, be authentic. And by that, I mean, show up as yourself and even be willing to share things about yourself in your own life as a way to connect with somebody. Again, that sometimes feels counterintuitive to people, like they feel like it should be a formal thing where they're an interviewer, but that's not what leads to a really good conversation. Have a beginner's mind. This is probably the hardest one for people to activate. And this is borrowed from Zen Buddhism, this idea of having a beginner's mind. So even if you're very deeply expert in a particular topic, you show up as if you're a beginner. And when you go to these interviews, you'll come at it from the perspective of your company and your products and what your assumptions about why customers hire you and why they fire you and what they want. And you have to find a way to leave all of that outside and come up with a blank, come in with a blank piece of paper so that they can guide you to what really matters. You can discover things that you didn't expect. And that's a very hard thing. It's a hard thing for all of us to do. It's hard for me to do still. And then finally, again, a counterintuitive maybe mindset is a bias towards just going out and having conversations, right? Don't over-engineer the preparation, don't over-engineer your thinking through the interview. Just go talk to a customer. Because if whatever plan you make for what you think you're going to learn and how you're going to learn it is probably going to get thrown out the window within the first 30 seconds of talking to an actual person. It never fails to surprise you. So just having a bias towards going and having these conversations is the last mindset. So 4 mindsets. So I've just gone through these 3 foundational things you need to be a market detective: language, method, mindset. I think I'll stop there. I had a couple other comments about just how do you think about this, not at the level of an individual, but as an organization. But why don't I stop there so we have a good amount of time to do questions.
Hey, that was fantastic.
Very nice, insightful session, David. We have Professor Dr. T.V. Gopal. Professor Gopal, you want to unmute and ask, because I just want to.
Yes. Good evening and thank you very much, Dr. David and Dr. Rajaram. I simply made an observation based on certain studies that I have been doing in usability engineering. The goal of a customer is twinned: adequate work done plus no embarrassment, including.
Sorry, can you say that again? The goal of a customer is which? Can you start that? The goal of
the
customer.
dual goal. It's a dual goal. Get adequate work done. That I agree, which is so nicely presented and illustrated by you with good examples. The second one is, it's a twin goal, no embarrassment, including I don't know conditions. We don't want to say I don't know. We don't want to get embarrassed. So unless I meet both the goals, or at least model both the goals simultaneously, customer behavior will be difficult to comprehend. Your comments?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean that what I would say is that so certainly getting whatever the work done is, right? That's kind of the functional idea of a job to be done. Not getting embarrassed, you could either think about that as one of their emotional jobs to be done. That's kind of a universal one because we never want to be embarrassed. So when you are developing, right? Because remember I said you usually want to get more than one thing done at the same time. You have multiple goals, to your point, or multiple jobs to be done. Not being embarrassed could be a job that you have, right? I want to avoid embarrassment. Or I suppose it could be an evaluative criteria for how you evaluate solutions, meaning for why you hire, it could be part of your definition of quality. When I evaluate a solution, am I likely to be more or less embarrassed if I take that solution? And so I think it fits very well into this framework. Just oftentimes those emotional jobs to be done or social jobs to be done are more powerful than the functional jobs to be done, and are the things that really drive customer purchase decisions. So, I would argue that car purchases are that way, right? So when we buy a car, we have functional jobs to be done, like maybe I want to commute to work, or I want to take my children to school, or I want to be able to move stuff from one place to the next in my car. Those are the functional jobs. But then there are emotional jobs around, well, I want to feel a certain way when I drive my car. Maybe I want to feel successful, or maybe I want to feel like a responsible parent, or like I'm taking good care of my kids, so I buy a very safe car. Then there are these social jobs around, I want to project a certain image of myself. Maybe I don't want to be embarrassed, to your point, by my car choice, or so I don't want it to be too, show-offy or ostentatious. Or maybe I buy a hybrid or something because I want to show everybody that I care about the environment, right? There's sort of social jobs. And with cars, oftentimes those functional jobs are just table stakes. Like those are the things that, of course, all cars are going to be able to do those things, but it's these emotional and social jobs that are driving whether I buy car A or car B. And those are often things that the marketers play with their brands and their advertising and all of that on. So I like that idea of the two goals, and I think that's a nice example.
In fact, Dr. Rajaram was narrating a nice anecdote on the car in the beginning of his introduction to your lecture. Just to add on, I'm in an academic institution, and my car suddenly gets into this intruder alarm mode, even if I get into it. God only knows why it happens. And it attracts the attention of everybody, and they keep on telling, why is it making so much of noise? It's pretty peculiar. None of us can explain. None of us can explain. It just keeps on honking, saying there's an intruder in. I am the fellow who is in. Anyway.
Yeah, well, so it's not helping you not be embarrassed, I guess.
That's true.
Right.
Anyway, we become creative in academic institutions when we are cut to the quick at times. Anyway, good, thanks.
Yeah, Professor Gopal, I was wondering, how come you are coming from an angle of embarrassment? Now I try to put two and two together.
We don't really want to catch so much of attention with all the chalk piece on our trousers, dirt on the apron, and all of a sudden these conditions draw a lot of attention.
Good.
So it's like that.
Yeah, there are at least 3 to 4 questions which are lined up. Maybe Srikanth, you can unmute and ask your question next.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. David, for this insightful session. It is very useful. Basically, I'm a spin trainer, not the spin Chennai, but the other spin, which is, I'm sure you must be knowing, the spin selling cycles of Neil Rackham. So how is spin relevant today? Because spin was introduced 35 years back, and I still coach spin. So how do you see the relevance of spin technique into the technique which you're telling, which is very thoughtful and insightful for me in terms of the language, in terms of what you said today, and the jobs to be done was really something which ticked off to me. So can you just correlate the two, the spin of Neil Rackham and the book of yours, The Secret Life of Customers?
Sure. Yeah. So I remember looking at that book a long time ago. So I don't remember everything about it, but I think it's a way to have sales conversations, right, in a way that elicits.
Yeah, the situation, problem, implication, and need payoff.
Yeah, I think it's consistent in the sense that you know, situations kind of like the circumstance, problems kind of like the job to be done. I don't know where implication fits, needs, payoffs, where exactly that fits. But what's that?
The consequences.
Yeah, the consequences.
Not taking a decision. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that, and again, I'm not an expert on that. So, but I think it's complementary, and I think you could use these same. I think you could use the language, method, mindset while you're doing spin selling, right? It just gives you maybe a richer vocabulary or a specific vocabulary for what you're getting at with the situation. Because I only went kind of through the level 1 vocabulary, and with circumstances, job, there's one level below that of additional sub words. And I think it gives you a vocabulary that you could use in a selling conversation where, you know, the situation is kind of like the circumstances, problems are like jobs. And it reminds me, you know, sometimes people will say, well, how does jobs to be done, for example, relate to design thinking? And I think they're very complementary, because I think there's different varieties of design thinking, but the first stage is usually something like have empathy with your customer, right? Create empathy. But from what I've seen, it doesn't really tell you how to do that, right? Like well, how do I have empathy with you know, this person? And what I'm trying to fill in is a specific way to, like, what does it mean to have empathy? Well, it's about, you know, getting into their circumstances, their jobs to be done, you know, what they're hiring today, why their help wanted signs, and just put a specific stake in the ground as to how you do that. And maybe it's complementary to spin selling in the same way.
Absolutely. I think you've given a very new perspective. I mean, I've been very passionate about spin a long years, but I think you've given a completely new perspective. So I'm going to grab your book soon and look a lot more, and probably do a research between the two and see how I can synchronize the two.
Yeah, I'd love to see what you come up with. That's pretty cool. I have thought, because I made a wrong statement a month or so ago where I said that there isn't a lot of, because there isn't a lot written about how to do B2B customer research, like in a B2B context in particular. And there's a section, even though all the examples I was talking about today were B2C, I do have a section in the second part of my book about how this all applies to B2B, which it does. And someone said, oh, well, you know, why don't you look at the 5 million books that are written about selling? because there's a lot of great thinking that's been done about how to sell, right? And I think I'd like to look into that a little bit and figure out maybe there's something to write about just how this can support some of the selling techniques.
Yeah, absolutely. It works very well. I think what you said perfectly suits what spin selling does. And in your perspective, it gives you a whole lot of new perspective. Thank you so much, David. Thanks for the session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Susinder, you may unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Rajaram. David, I just want to ask you one question, which is based on, you know, as you said, the customer's mind is a mystery box. And if a customer decides on a particular brand, it is because he is expecting a package of benefits. It is both rational and emotional. And these package of benefits has to be found out through a qualitative study, which has to be quantitatively analyzed using tools like conjoint analysis. So only when you do that kind of analysis, it will be possible to establish relationship between benefits and then arrive at what the customer wants. Now, if this is something that takes a lot of research, I would say a completely well-vetted questionnaire, starting with a well-vetted questionnaire to meeting customers at the right points and selecting the right customers and all that. Is it easy and is it simplified in today's situation for launching new products or to shape existing new, reposition existing brands? What is your take on that? I just wanted to hear you. You partly explained some of this in an answer to one of the questions earlier, but I just wanted to know how much of this qualitative and quantitative research is important in analyzing, the benefits that a customer is looking forward to.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the ideas that kind of is a theme that runs through the story is this idea of small data before big data. So we all love data and big data, and companies love data and data analysis. But oftentimes there's an assumption that if you have a lot of data and you gather a lot of data, there must be a lot of insight in it that can be gathered from that data. And what I assert in the book is that before you go in the world of big data, you have to gather what I call small data. And small data is just insights you get out of a small number of qualitative, conversations with people that you can use to shape then your hypotheses that you want to test and validate in your big data. And there are two main characters. Well, there's sort of three main characters in the story. One of them is this market detective guy who's kind of old-fashioned, and he does the small data interviews, and he gets teamed up unwillingly with a young kind of computer genius who embodies the big data approach. And then they go on the market investigation together, and they sort of teach each other. He teaches her about sort of the small data stuff, and she teaches him about the big data stuff. And I think that sort of symbolically represents how companies should approach it, right? That you've got to have both. The small data, I think, should come before. And I think it's applicable to launching new products or repositioning existing brands. If you're launching new products, certainly you want to go out and have some open-ended, exploratory, discovery-oriented conversations. But if you're repositioning existing brands, I'd argue it's just as important, if not more important, because your temptation is going to be to default to what you've always done. And it's going to be really hard to go out and have those open-ended conversations without having bias about what you think the answer is. So I think it applies to both. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Excellent answer. And I think it also happens. Most of the models today are kind of available readily as a software, and you can employ them and deploy them and get the results you want. But there is always, as you said, a good dipstick can throw a lot of results which you don't really kind of look forward to from a model that is there in the system.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, in the sense like, if you were to take a decision, which one would you choose? In the sense like there can be difference between your dipstick and the model that is employed in a system.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends. It just depends on the type of question you want to answer and where you are in the process. I think that I have a strong bias towards qualitative interviews, and certainly if it's a new product and you're in the early discovery phase, I probably wouldn't do any quantitative stuff. You know, I'd probably do qualitative stuff and then iterate around what you think you know about the customer until you sort of validate that. If you're at the point where you need to make a big investment and you need to get some quantitative validation to validate the investment, then again, I wouldn't do, I would always do qualitative first, because otherwise you're just, I mean, you're just, your quantitative output is only as good as the questions you're asking with it, right? And
very
yeah.
right. You're right. Yeah, correct. You know, the question you are asking, that has to be very sharp and very clear, and should be giving you results that you want. So yeah, I think you explained it very well, and excellent presentation. And thank you very much for being with us today. And thanks, Mr. Rajaram, to allowing me to ask a question.
Good question, Susinder. Now we move over to HP. Can you please identify yourself, HP? You can unmute and ask your question.
Yeah. This is Sri Krishna, a very insightful session. My question is, right, like about the language part of it. Is that the driver to build your features for your product? Is that a right understanding?
Yeah. So I think that the way I would think about it is so how would you know if you had a good language for talking about customers? Like what would a good language be? It would be a language that guides you to get the right information about customers at the right level of detail with the right richness and nuance, right? Because you want to your point, you want to be able to develop experiences or products that have important details in them, right? That matter to the customer. Like it's often the little details that make us really love products, right? Like one of the reasons Uber was so popular when it came out was that it wasn't just that it got me from A to B. There were all these little details in the experience that were better than just taking a cab in New York City. And so if you're doing a market investigation, you need a language that elicits detailed knowledge about the nature of what the customer needs so that you can engineer against that template. And so I think that the things like the jobs and what jobs bundled together in a particular circumstance, details around the different aspects of circumstance, about how they define quality. Like maybe there's 10 different dimensions they're evaluating quality on, and what the different performance characteristics are, what the current solutions are, and where they fall short. All of those detailed insights, I think, are the things that enable you to, that at least will inspire your thinking around product features and other aspects of the experience. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good, David. When you plan to release your audio kind of version of the book? I was just checking.
Oh yeah, so there is an audio version of the book already.
The audio version of the book in Audible, right? Generally, when people publish books, right? Like I was just wondering if we have thoughts in publishing an Audible version for this book.
There is an Audible version already. So I think I don't know if it's available in all countries yet. Let me check on that. But it's definitely in the US. Oh, not in India. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me, is the book available in India at all?
Yeah,
I see a hardcover book, but not the Audible version. Yeah.
Correct. Hardcover book is available.
Okay.
Yeah, with COVID these days, right? I'm a kind of an Audible fan, listening when I do my physical activities, right? Like, I don't know, this is kind of a job to be done from my perspective.
Yeah. There is one more question. Thanks, Sri Krishna, for your question.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. We have Dr. Nitya is asking a very interesting question. Dr. Nitya, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, sir. Yeah, thank you. Hi, Mr. David. This is Nitya from India. Of course, it is a great session. And my question goes like this. Amid a lot of market research done in case of competitor analysis and the customer expectation, why few products are failing in the market? I'm just curious to understand, especially in FMCG, in automobile sector, how does the product fail in the market? What would be the reasons? I'm just like to hear from you.
That is, after doing all the market research, the
Yes.
design thinking, and all of that, why still some products fail?
Boy, that's a big question. I think, but I think there are probably a lot of reasons. I mean, there are lots of reasons things fail. Some have to do with the bad fit between the product and the customer, which I think is what you're asking about directly. I mean, there are other reasons things fail, whether it's, you know, the marketing or the execution, or, you know, there are lots of failure modes for new launches. One thing and I don't know that I could have a universally valid answer, but I certainly see this a lot, and I mean it's really quite striking. But a lot of market research that's done just isn't that useful. You know, I've seen this twice in the last couple of months. One with the client that I've been working for, which is one of the 10 biggest companies in the world. They commissioned a big market segmentation research exercise from one of the big consulting firms and paid a lot of money for it. And they don't use it because they said, well, this isn't actionable. I had a similar experience with, we did a jobs to be done project for one of the big 5 professional sports leagues in the US. And they had just done a year-long market research customer segmentation activity with the same big consulting firm. And the reason they hired us is because they said, well, we have the segmentation now, but it's not actionable. We don't know how to use it. And the nature of the segmentation was, you know, it was based on kind of consumer behaviors and attitudes and demographic factors, but there was and kind of product choices, you know, what they liked about products, didn't like about products, but there was nothing in it about the jobs that customers wanted to get done in different circumstances. And I think it's sort of emblematic of a broader issue with the way a lot of market research is done, where there's a bias towards quantitative data above all, and sometimes and usually exclusively, you know, to gathering survey information where the surveys are asked in ways that just reinforce the assumptions about what the company already thinks, or they're product centric in the way they design these surveys, so that you know, they ask a customer, what do you like about our product? What don't you like about our product? What kind of, you know, what would you like in addition to this product? And it's kind of a surface level investigation where they're not getting at the underlying causality. Now, I don't know if that's the accurate answer to your question, like why products fail, but I certainly see a lot of money spent on market research activities that that miss the point in fundamental ways. So I don't know. Does that? What do you think? And what would your answer be? I'm curious, or other folks, to that question. It's a really great question.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. See, there is the business model, the pricing, the channel through which you know, you reach, the after sales service, what others talk about your product. There are so many other aspects where you know, these people, the product could have failed.
Timing also is a very important aspect.
Timing, yeah, timing to the market.
Will this be a chance? Actually, I have an idea. Like sometimes the research consultant, they may say not to launch a product. Would a company proceeding launching a product? That can even happen, right? The result of a market research can say the product may not suit the customer, or customer may not welcome the product. But for the want of some other reasons, can a company proceed with going for launching the product? Can this happen? I'm just doubtful.
You mean, could they launch it even if it contradicts the market research?
Yeah, launching against the market research result. Will they do like that?
Yeah, it can happen potentially.
Okay.
I think it can happen, or what also often happens is that market research is done to sort of reverse justify launching a product that you were going to launch anyway, right? Like, or so you, or you know, the product launch has a life of its own, you know, and a momentum, and it, you know, gets to this point about why do things get launched? Well, so a lot of our work is also focused on kind of how innovation works in an organization, you know, beyond just understanding customers, but how does the process work? And there's so many ways that projects can get perpetuated, even though, you know, if you were an objective, godlike observer, you would say that doesn't make sense, right? And so sometimes it can be as simple as, well, gosh, this team has been working on it for a year, and everybody's career is wrapped up in this project, and just sort of killing it would be devastating at a personal level to the people working on it, and it just keeps going. I mean, that's one of, you know, probably 20 reasons why things propagate like that.
Yeah, David, at this point, I want to alert you on you just overstepped your time. There are 3 more questions which are raised hands. So how do you want to take it?
Yeah, I'm happy to do 3 more questions. And then maybe we wrap after that. I also, I put my my LinkedIn and email in the chat. And so please, you know, please connect with me. I like to stay connected to people that I've met, and happy to do emails as well.
Sure. Fantastic. Bhaskar, you can ask this question. Bhaskar has an interesting question. So it is not, people always talk about products. Yeah, go ahead, Bhaskar.
David, this is Bhaskar. Actually, I have a question now. Is there any different approach for no service industry? Your product is completely different attributes is there. Service actually, even you provide the services for cross boundary, maybe, you know, in global service also is there. Maybe the attributes and parameters and then consideration, market research, everything is maybe no, not 100%, maybe 50 to 60% it differ from the physical product. Is there any different approach for no service industry services?
Yeah, so I would say it's almost more important for services businesses, right? Because there it's all about the experience, right? And you know, the reason I chose a coffee shop as the fictional company in the story, and that was the 3rd choice I made. I made some really bad choices before that, but then I decided to use a coffee shop, is because, you know, first of all, everybody can relate to it. We all go to coffee shops. I love coffee shops, so it's a personal passion of mine. And then it is really it's more of a service than it is a product, right? Because it's an experience you're getting, just like you would go if you went to a hotel, or so I think this does apply to services business in the sense that we still hire services businesses because we have jobs we want to get done, like problems and goals we want to achieve. Those are emotional, social, functional, right? We typically have a bundle of jobs we're hiring a service business for. They are influenced by our circumstances, kind of where we are in our lives. We have notions of what quality means, you solve for them with experiences. So yeah, I think it very much applies. And are you asking about B2C or B2B experience service business?
It's B2C.
B2C, yeah. So B2C, I think it's a very direct, easy parallel in terms of how you would do it.
it's a language actually. You say languages is important. How you are going to connect with the people, right? If it is a services, demographic, or there is geographical, local influences actually gives a different dimension, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Okay, thanks, David. Thanks for your answer.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, Professor Gopal.
Yes, I heard the nice discussion which Mr. Sushindran has initiated. I guided a PhD. Dr. Haider completed his PhD on blending quantitative and qualitative aspects in a model. He is now teaching in 2 universities in Canada. Very well rated. And we did a live website analysis for Lufthansa and British Airways as a part of the PhD. It's a very interesting area. There's no unique model, but we'll have to work on that. Sushinder is here, and nice question. Just to share an experience. Research did happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Gopal. Thank you very much.
If you want to, if you have a link to that, if you want to put it in the chat, I'd love to check it out. Sounds really interesting.
Okay, yeah, that would be very nice. Yeah,
I will do that.
Murthy, can you unmute and ask your question, please?
Yeah, hi, Mr. David. Just this question is in continuation with the madam Nitya asked. Like, I'm very young compared to all guys. Like, whenever we are introducing a product into the market, we arrive into such we arrive in some decision analysis. There we have seen many times we going in a wrong. In your experience, can you share us that in this decision analysis, where can we go wrong or where can we go right? Or in your experience, have you ever come across a metric table where a calculation says that that particular product can be run in a smooth way?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So is it?
Shall I repeat the question?
Yeah, Murthy, slightly not clear.
Okay. See, after making a market research or analysis in the market, we introduce a product. So when we are introducing a product into the market, we arrive into a certain decision analysis. So sometimes many times we go wrong. So is there any metric calculation stating that this type of calculation help us to introduce the product into the market in such a time or such a time period? Or a segment or in product quality matters or anything.
So I think the question is when you're at the point of introducing a product into the market and you're about to get some live feedback, how can you apply some of these same ideas in that context?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. That it's a really great question. So one of the other areas that I'm trying to learn more about is in the technology context, how does product management, product development work? And I've been talking with one of the big social media companies about their own process, and they're intrigued by jobs to be done as a way to make it more customer centric, right? Because it's their approach to figuring out what's going to work in the market is to develop a whole lot of things and then see what works, right? Like let's develop 50 things and 5 things will be embraced by customers and the rest will just stop. And they want to do better than that. Like they'd like to have a better, do it more efficiently. And so I think where we're headed with our conversation with them is that they want to start to introduce some of these tests and questions throughout their product development and launch process so that they can, so when they launch something, for example, they'll at least have a hypothesis about what jobs it's solving, what help wanted signs it's addressing, and maybe they've gotten some qualitative indicators of that. Hopefully they will by that point. But they've got some hypotheses, and then when a customer decides they do or don't like it when they introduce it into the market, they can probe on their hypotheses and update or refine their hypotheses. So I think it gives you an additional set of questions to ask and answer at all stages of the product development and launch process, so that you can connect what's happening to causality, or a theory of causality for why people are doing things or not doing things.
David, a follow-on question. That also will help in kind of pivoting in case there is an issue.
Yeah, it helps. Did you say connectivity?
No, pivoting. Pivot.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Right. So it does also help in pivoting, because and again, you may not be right about, because sometimes people will say, well, no matter how many interviews you do, customers don't always know how to articulate what they want, and they may even be wrong about what they want, right? So in other words, they'll say something, and then you'll give them that thing, and they won't like it, right? Because they don't know until they've got it in their hands and they're experiencing it, right? Which is certainly true, but it's still helpful to have this vocabulary as a way to describe your hypotheses when you're putting it out there, which could be wrong, right? And also to capture and interpret the feedback you get once it is out there and you realize you're wrong, right? You still need this language as a way to describe what's happening, rather than just the surface observation that they're rejecting your product.
Yep. I think, thanks very much, David, for two things. One, you have laid out a systematic process to make this whole, introduction of new products or being relevant to the customer and enhancing the success of products and services. That is one. Second, you kind of, we taken a little more time than what we ought to do. Thanks for your patient answering of all the questions. I know so many people out there still have more questions, but definitely you keep sharing. We will go back to Duncan, and he has also shared his email. So at this time, I would like to invite Raghav, steering committee member of Spin Chennai, to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, Raghav.
Thanks, Rajaram. Thanks, David, for taking the time to speak at Spin Chennai. For people on call, David has joined from Boston. He has spent more than 2 hours today with us. And he's one of the very key authorities on jobs to be done theory, and his work has been really astounding. And being a regular follower of Innosight, you can just go to his work at Innosight, and they help companies which we cannot live without. So all those companies they help. And he talked about Twitter, and last month we had Lakshmi Shankar from Twitter speaking on similar lines. He mentioned about the jobs to be done theory, how they are implementing at Twitter. So it was one of the important talk that we had ever. And so to summarize your talk, you talked about your book, starting with how we have laid out the 50% of the book is about fiction, and the other 50% is about the tools and the techniques you covered in this book, and then the mystery of solving the customer behavior using a market detective approach. And you talked about the language, methods, and the mindset. So under language, you talked about the key concepts that are really helpful, especially the jobs to be done theory, circumstances, and today's solution and quality, and help wanted signs. So those things. And again, on the methods, we have a list of questions to be asked, and the mindsets about being really curious, humility, and starting with the beginner's mind. All those things are just do it, and the just do it attitude. So these are really very helpful. And these are some of the sessions we would always like to organize, especially we get such thoughts from Innosight. Thank you so much for taking the time and speaking here. I think this is really one of the talks that alter our thinking upside down. So thank you so much.
Right. Well, thanks for having me. It was nice to meet all of you, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Let us all unmute and maybe take a photo as well, along with David. Raghav, can you help us?
Sure. Yeah. Yes. I'll take a photo here. I'll just share it on the chat.
Let us all unmute our videos
and just taking the photo right here on my laptop.
Sure.
It's taken, one is taken. I'm just taking the other one. Yeah, I'm just taking the other one right now. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, David. Thanks.
Thank you.